I think that so many people, I mean, I myself for sure, am constantly telling myself stories that may or may not be true.
Yeah.
How do you break that cycle?
By realizing what you just said is not true. Because what you said is I'm telling myself, right? But you're not. You don't wake up in the morning and go, no, what I'm excited to do is to tell myself a negative story.
Oh my God.
Hey everybody, I'm Lori Schulweis.
And I'm Jen Giamo.
And welcome to a very special episode of Everybody Talks, the podcast where we explore the wide world of wellness.
As you know, last May, Lori and I attended Dave Asprey's biohacking conference in Dallas, and we got a chance to do our very first in-person interview.
It was so exciting. So if you want to watch this episode, go to our YouTube channel right now at Everybody Talks Podcast to see our face-to-face interview with the mind architect, Peter Crone.
Peter is a transformative thought leader, writer, and speaker who specializes in unlocking human potential by addressing subconscious mental and emotional barriers.
His philosophy revolves around redefining our relationship with fear, stress, and self-imposed limitations, leading to a life of greater joy and authenticity.
With his unique approach that blends neuroscience, mindfulness, and metaphysics, he helps individuals break free from limiting beliefs to create lives of freedom and fulfillment.
So here now is our conversation with Peter Crone.
How did you get started doing this?
I mean, a lot of my own trauma, you know, like certainly growing up. My mom died when I was 7 of cancer, and she'd been sick for 2 or 3 years. I actually have just come from a kind of hero's journey because I was in Monaco working with Formula One people, and then I went to Belgium. My mom was from Belgium, and I hadn't seen my uncle, my only living relative, her brother, for 7 years. And even last time I saw him, it was a big party, and we never had a drop-in where I was like, tell me about my mum, you know, because at 7, like, I certainly wasn't having those conversations.
Yeah.
So it was really beautiful to be able to go back and have some of those, like, questions answered. So that was a big component of where I became who I am, because in ways that I didn't understand at the time, that loss, or the story of loss, was very pivotal in the creation of my identity, the genesis of my fears. And I eventually broke out of that courtesy of a relationship where I'd fallen in love for the first time at the ripe old age of 29, thinking that we know everything about love. And, you know, it was such a diluted version of what I now understand love to be, but nonetheless was a catalyst for me to desperately try and hold on to this girl and be the perfect boyfriend, which was my survival mechanism for trying to avoid my pain of loss. Yeah. Of course, life set me up for success. She left, I fell apart, saw the whole matrix of my own identity and realized, wow, I never lost anything. My parents died. Yeah. But there was a lot of hurt with that, and that's okay. And I can still miss my dad today. But I didn't have to live in the fear of loss, because that never actually transpired. So that was probably the biggest catalyst for me, you know, getting into the work that I was doing, was really that relationship, which was the sort of aftermath of a deeper fear of, you know, losing something of worth when I was a kid. And no one would begrudge me that, you know, it's like, it makes sense. Sure. I mean, most people think I should have been on the streets as a drug addict, I turned out all right.
I think you turned out okay.
Yeah. So, and then a ton of other things that transpired, and even more recently, you know, a few months ago, I went through a tough breakup, and it was a beautiful relationship with so much love, and it really brought a couple of deeper things that I hadn't sort of got to excavate yet. So that was very both humbling but powerful and teary and beautiful. And it sort of pushed me even deeper into my humanity, which I'm grateful for. So
it must be hard to be in a relationship with you.
Yeah, I'm such a pain in the ass.
No, I don't.
I know.
I don't mean
no, I know you don't. I'm just.
I don't mean it like that at all. Because
I
mean, you have this such strong intuition about people. I feel like you immediately know. Like, do you know what we're thinking right now?
Yeah, absolutely. I know what you had for breakfast. I can tell you all about your relationship problems.
Is that like? Yeah. Do you find that you come up against that in relationships where you're so evolved and so compassionate and not everyone is like that, you know?
Well, it's very sweet of you to say, and I do appreciate that, and I'm obviously not naive to the fact that I know the gift and the ability I have and the things I can see. Yeah. When it comes to personal relationships, and that was really evident in my last one, it's not something that I do in a relationship, right? Like, I don't give unsolicited counsel. Right. I mean, I could see things if you did want to ask about you, of course, but I'm walking around, yes, to a certain degree, seeing the matrix of human behavior, but it's not really, it's not for me. I don't have the audacity to feel that I should tell people how to live their life.
Right.
And I think the more that we evolve, and again, without seeming, full of myself, like, just because I can doesn't mean that I want to or I should, and it's not my place, because if you understand the nature of the ego by design, it's very defensive. So most people, unless they're kind of inviting you into these internal vulnerable spaces, you're going to be met with a lot of resistance.
Yeah.
So I learned that, through really having a ton of love for humans, and that people are hurting.
Yeah.
And as much as I want to help, I know I can help. I know I can introduce them to a new world with which they're not familiar, they don't even know is available, which is itself potent.
Right.
But if they're not looking for it and they're not ready, then I'm just going to be met with a lot of strong arms, and it's like, so even in personal relationships, it can be tough from your complementary point of view. Obviously, I was being jestful. But I'm actually just a regular dude who's a bit of a clown. I'm a hopeless, affectionate lover who loves, to have, what do they call it? Public displays of affection. I love companionship. I love beautiful women, and I was a late developer. I've never been someone who slept around, fortunately, but I still love to be around someone whose company is both inspiring, but affectionate and kind. And so when I'm in a romantic situation, I tend to defer to just being somebody's partner, and hopefully they're, someone they can rely on. They can tell me anything without judgment, and that they know I've got their back, and that we explore and play.
Yeah.
And of course, if they want to delve into these realms, I'm normally going to be drawn to somebody who has done a lot of work, who is inspired by self-evolution and self-actualization, and because that's my passion. So, so.
It's funny because in that room yesterday, all you need is one person to open up, and then it was like an avalanche. Then everybody was like, "Oh wait, I have this relationship that I had to think about." It's just very interesting that you just need that one person to really open up their
even
hearts.
Just the feedback that you give to that person, someone else in a different circumstance
totally
can
resonates.
relate to it and apply it to whatever it is they're going through.
And that's why I was so grateful to that particular woman, because it's not my first rodeo. I've seen this happen, and I feel we could have. We went over by 45 minutes as it was. I think we could have been in the room for another 2 or 3 hours, and everyone would have had a therapy session.
Absolutely.
But it is nice, because that's where people can see that, we definitely are more connected than we are divided, because of the similarities of what everyone's dealing with. Your husband might not be Brian, but it's Dave, and the same dynamics of sort of feeling judged by one another is still at play. Or the disgruntled dad that everyone can relate to because you didn't quite perform at the level you thought you were supposed to. Human beings are quite simple in their complexity in terms of the things we talk about. It's usually in the realm of something to do with relationships, or something to do with our health, or something to do with our career or money or our interest. That's about it. Like wherever you go in the world, there's sort of the five
Those
topics.
are the universal topics.
100%.
And what I've delineated in my work as I've gotten deeper and deeper into refining my services and being of making a difference, is that there are these primal prisons that we all have. And so once I know that, then someone might tell me their story, but where my mind goes is I know where they're stuck. So then it's sort of like a form of like almost magic, where like David Copperfield knows exactly the journey he's taking us on as the viewing audience, but we don't know what he's really up to. It's sort of like I'm doing that, but my sort of white rabbit out of the hat is to take them to a point of freedom that they didn't know that they could actually access.
I said that yesterday. I said that you're like a magician. Tell us about this idea of mind architecture. What does that mean?
It was sort of, necessity being the mother of invention, right? Because I'd been called a spiritual teacher, a happiness guru, affectionately by friends, a hitman for the ego, which was always fun. So I just recognized that whatever the moniker was, it was pre-contaminated, and it kind of alluded to some sort of idea what people might have of what I do, and I wanted to leave it open. And so I'd loved architecture as a kid, and I think there's something beautiful about the fact that we are curators of our own life. So I love the whole energy of the fact that we're designing, and whether we realize it or not, creating our existence. And so there's a component of architecture there where we're building something, and of course what I'm focused on is what's going on in what I call the mind. Most people think that's between our ears. I actually have a different distinction. I say the mind is more like our aura. We live inside of it. The mind isn't inside of our body, but the body is actually the effect of the mind.
Yeah.
So it reframes everything. So I realized, okay, well, who we are as a byproduct, the space we occupy, and the most powerful and potent space that we occupy is the mind that we live in, based on the narrative that usually we've inherited or has been triggered through our childhood. So it just made sense that, okay, well, mind architect, I'll redesign your inner thinking space and give you the opportunity to live in a new world.
Too. I remember what I was going to say. I love the way you use words, because I was kind of catching on, I love when you were saying because, it's like be, and if you separate cool? Word, it's so cool the way you're thinking about.
Yeah.
And another thing that also resonated with me was about the future. It's like you reach a certain age, I know I've kind of at that a little bit. Yeah. And you think like your one day is now.
Yeah.
You can't think like in a someday realm anymore. Yeah. You have to think like, okay, if you want to do something, you must do it now. Otherwise, you don't know. It's not guaranteed, like, in the future, that all of that kind of resonated with what I was feeling during your talk yesterday.
No.
I feel like, I love the words, though. I love the words being positive, don't die. The opposite of don't die. No, live.
Yes.
Right.
Right.
It's so important to think of it in that opposite way.
Yeah.
And the way, I'm telling you what you already know.
That's okay. It's good reflection.
I'm reflecting back on you. No, just how you have to think about going forward and how you have to be very present in the now without getting lost too much.
You're very good at that, though. I feel like there
I'm
are
very
people
good
that
at being
are good
now.
at,
Oh, really? Okay.
I think so. I mean, that resonated with me. Talking about like living in the past or the future. You're never here. You're never fully here.
Yeah.
And that's. We're not going to psychoanalyze me, but that,
right. But you struggle with that a little bit.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
And it's when you understand the mechanics of how the brain works, right? Because we're mammals and our primordial imperative is to survive, right? No you chase a fly around your kitchen. It's like, it's not like, I'll just hang out here and you can swat me, right? It's like we all want to survive.
Yeah, right.
So when you understand that the brain then has over time learned to assimilate things that seem to work well, things that didn't go well, and we tend to navigate from the perspective of our traumas and our failures, right? They tend to define our choices because that hurt, that sucked, that was painful. So it's natural if we're going to survive that we want to avoid that.
Right.
But what most people don't understand is what that does is it perpetuates it, right? There's the old expression, what you resist persists. So when we're trying to mitigate future pain by being informed by past pain, then what we're doing is we're constantly reinforcing past pain. Right, I think I used the example of the free throw show, the NBA guy, right? Like he's trying not to miss.
Not to miss.
So then what's he always focused on is missing, right? So it takes, it's so self-evident, and I always tell people, what I'm speaking about is very simple, it's just not easy. Because when you get it, it's just like, oh my God, this makes so much sense.
Yeah.
But what you're up against is usually decades of conditioning that is the antithesis of that, right?
Yeah.
So that's where it's compassion and practice over time.
Yeah.
But we are definitely slaves to the illusion of psychological time, both past and future. And people, especially as you heard me talk about yesterday, are really under the impression that the life they want is in the future.
Right.
Until you realize, well, when the fuck have I been in my future?
Exactly.
no wonder my life's not
exactly.
working. Yeah.
So how do you? So that's the part that this freedom from the limitations of our mind, right? How do you do it? I know you have a whole mastermind.
Yes, of course. That's one way that people could find out.
Just explain that concept to me, I guess. Freedom from the limitations of your mind.
So, the how is what a lot of people want. We're trained to sort of focus in the realm of action, right? You go and see an expert of any kind, whether it be like a nutritionist, a trainer, whatever, you're going to wait for them to tell you to do something. And so that's where the default is. My realm isn't really in doing, it's really in understanding. So my first box that I work with is awareness. So freedom from the limitations of the mind, the how is, well, we have to find out where are you limited. So the thing is, as human beings, we tend to want to avoid pain and suffering and constraint. So we have the myriad of ways of escaping, from food to alcohol to prescription drugs, street drugs, sex, whatever it is, right? And so what that does is it doesn't actually address what's going on. So I use awareness with, as you saw yesterday, a lot of love and compassion, but some real tough love where I just point out what is. Right? It's not even my methodology. I'm just pointing out the world that people are already stuck in so that they can see it and then own it and be responsible for it and decide if they want to stay there. once you see the limitations, you can't unsee them. What you can be present to is how much it impacts your life. And when people see that, they realize, I don't want to do that anymore. So that's usually the access or the start to freedom, which is my main product, is to see, wow, I've been living in this prison usually from about the age of 3, 4, or 5. And it's now defined the way that I show up as an adult in my relationships, in my career, and my financial ability to earn, all of that. And it's a huge limitation. So when you see it, it's natural, because from the perspective of the being that I'm speaking to, you're boundless, timeless, it's suffocating, right? And so you're like, wait, I'm this exponentially available being who can really access anything, but I'm looking through a very confined lens, and that's why I suffer. So that's where freedom lies, is it's the exposure of it versus the finding of it. Yes. So my catchphrase that I use and I shared yesterday is, I don't solve problems, I dissolve them. Yeah. So it's the dissolution of the constraint, which then naturally and effortlessly brings freedom and love and value to the surface.
Yeah. So when you're working with a client, are you asking them a series of questions? I mean, do they typically come to you with a specific problem that they want to solve?
Typically, yeah. Okay. Yeah, and it doesn't have to be, particularly challenging or traumatic, although many of them are. It might be, I remember I had a hedge fund guy, he had, more money than time. He wasn't for wanting for anything, but he knew that I worked with a lot of athletes, and he was a great golfer, a scratch golfer, and he developed the yips, right? So meaning that he would have a short putt and he would kind of flinch. And he thought that was his problem until we, unpacked the fact that he had a completely dysfunctional marriage. He hated his, something to do with his dad, and that was all at the foundation of why there was so much pressure on him to be perfect. He'd won the club championship, and then whenever things didn't work out, he was putting more and more pressure, which developed to this sort of neurological response of starting to have the yips. So, it doesn't always mean that where they start is where we finish. Invariably, it's not the case. It's really the story that somebody tells me is really just the access point to where is that story being generated from, right? Because our conscious thoughts are the byproduct of these subconscious patterns. And I'm using their anxiety, depression, marriage issue, like the woman yesterday and the issue with her husband. I think everyone in the room was like, holy shit, it's not because of what he's saying, it's because she believes it to be true. And that got born way before she even knew that man existed on the planet. Yeah. That's cool, right? Because then it's like you start to look in the right place, which is within us, versus pointing fingers at the people you think are the antagonists in your life.
Well, yeah, I also think it was incredible that you're like, is that exactly what he said?
Yeah. Right.
No, that's what you're hearing. And
exactly.
So often, I know this in my own life too, it's like you're hearing what you think people are saying to you.
Yes.
And you really don't, it's like I try to live by, you don't know what's going on in someone's life. When they're snippy with you, when they're mean, when they, you don't know. They've had a bad day, and they're taking it on you. And likewise, sometimes I have a bad day and I take it out on.
Yes.
And so it's hard to separate what's really being said with how you're feeling, which is
and that's what breeds the compassion, right? Is that everyone's carrying a cross that you're not aware of,
Totally.
That they're not even aware of.
That sometimes,
most of it is a blind spot.
Yesterday, she definitely wasn't aware.
She was not aware.
Yeah.
No, and that's why today I looked at her and she's all bright, starry-eyed.
I mean, it must be like a weight lifted off of her shoulders.
It is. That's usually one of the first kind of forms of reflection I get. Is like, I just feel so lighter. I see breathing patterns change. I mean, if we were to measure some of those vital signs from respiratory rate to heart rate to blood rate, I guarantee you they'd all change. Like you literally, the power of the thought processes and emotions over our physiology, why I talked about dis-ease, the absence of ease that then over time will manifest as disease, versus if you live in a state of peace, then for the most part, without any kind of weird genetic issues, you're going to have a pretty vital body.
Yeah, and that took 2 minutes.
Right. It didn't take very long.
I know.
He's zeroed in.
Really, I think he's been doing it for a while. So
I know.
That's one of the fun things. People are like, how the fuck did that happen so quickly?
I know.
Yeah. It's fun.
It's
funny.
And that you talked also about reprogramming your subconscious, right? And
the
things that trigger you. And how do I recognize in myself what it is that's the real reason I'm being triggered?
You'd have to do a little bit of reflection. It's always going to be a perceived threat. Usually, I think as human beings, when we're in our integrity, we are we want to be at least like transparent. We want to be honest, right? I think what you're feeling is the sense of injustice, that you recognize where people are categorically lying, and that gets exacerbated, right, when somebody's in a position of authority. There's a certain degree of, again, understanding or patience if it's a kid, right? We learn lying at a very young age. It's a survival strategy, right? Because, well, who broke this or who stole the cookie? The consequences to that child are, oh shit, like I know where this goes and I'm going to be in trouble, which is a threat to me being loved and accepted, right? So it's really primal at that level. So lying becomes a means of just us trying to garner love and acceptance, or more sort of pertinently, trying to avoid any kind of discipline or being discarded, right? Because in our DNA, you get kicked out of the tribe, you're not going to survive, right? You're going to be eaten by bigger predators. And so we're pretty young in terms of a species from that perspective. We can't rationalize our DNA away. We're like, well, it doesn't matter. Even if I get kicked out from my parents, I'll get picked up, I'll go and live with my uncle, I'll stay with my friend. It's primal. So I think in the world today, when we look at positions of authority and where people do have a say that impacts the whole, when we feel that pretense and the facade and the disingenuousness that's completely inauthentic but is nonetheless having a very deleterious effect, we feel the injustice. I know I'm a stand for people's freedom, for their sovereignty and choice. And it's like a kid who's also confused. It's sort of, in psychological terms, it's this sense of intermittent reinforcement, which is where particularly women fall prey to the guy who, like I said, has got a lot of potential. He might show the periodic sense of affection and love, which is enough to kind of just get by, and then in between it's abuse, right? As somebody sitting in a slot machine, you get this occasional hit of you win $100, but you've already spent 600, but you want to get the jackpot. And as long as you get a little something, people stay in. And so this is what I see right now, and not just politics, but religion, education, the food industry, the FDA, all of these big organizations are just basically full of shit. And as I would like to assert, the majority, the standard deviation of humans, are just good people who want to raise a family, they want to have a nice home, they want to be able to afford food, maybe go on a vacation, and maybe make a difference. It's nothing too sinister. And then you've got this small group who, sadly, through fear and, ultimately ego, want to control and have all the power and the wealth. And, but I would also, to a certain degree, feel like that's part of the opportunity that we have, is can we transcend that, and can we collectively be a stand for the greater good, so that that dis-ease in society doesn't stay. It's like if we have a vital body, we can all have cancerous cells, the small minority, but the whole that is more holistically unified will triumph, and so, but it gets to me periodically. I'm not going to lie. I'm still human. I've calmed down a lot, but since I got shadow banned.
Well, you said something else too. You're a victim of your own perspective, right? It's like how you view things.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's very true. And the things that you tell yourself. We spoke to someone, I don't know, a week or two ago about negative self-talk. I think that so many people, I myself for sure, am constantly telling myself stories that may or may not be true.
Yeah.
How do you break that cycle?
By realizing what you just said is not true. Because what you said is, I'm telling myself, right? But you're not. You don't wake up in the morning and go, no, what I'm excited to do is to tell myself a negative story.
Oh my God. Right. Thank you. I've been spending years of friendship trying to tell her that.
So, I'm going to make my coffee and then I'm going to beat the shit out of myself. Right?
Yeah.
But, okay.
So that's the first thing to recognize, because albeit I recognize and I really acknowledge the idea of ownership there and wanting to be a responsible human being, you also have to be aware of the mechanistic nature of the ego, right? It's on its own MO. It's going to do whatever it can to be right about its own limitations. So those thoughts aren't generated consciously. So if you could make a kind of comparison, say a radio, when you walk past a radio, it could be like a jockey that you just detest, and they're talking about all sorts of garbage. We can think of some people in New York, there's one guy in particular who, right? And it's like, okay, for some people, they want to tune into that.
Yeah.
Right.
But for the most part, people who've got any kind of level of discernment or intelligence or moralistic, compass, they're like, this is garbage.
Right.
Right? So when you look at your own thought processes from the same perspective, you start to have the ability to choose. Which frequencies do you want to tune into and which you want to realize are fundamentally pretense and garbage. Right. It's just very subtle because when it's inside of our skull, or that's how it occurs, it's very intimate. It's there, right? We're driving, we hear. We're in the shower, we hear. We lie down at night and we're just here. So it's being able to, as I think it was Epicurus said, like, you know, it takes an intelligent mind to be able to entertain a thought without believing it. Right? So being able to listen to your own thought processes without actually having to think that's you or that there's any validity behind it. Right. And so in spiritual circles, they might call that the witness or the observer effect. And if you just look at it logically, if you have thoughts that you're aware of, then you can't be the thoughts because you're aware of them. Yeah. So you're not creating anything. Yeah. But what is being generated from these deeper prisons that were triggered in childhood and whatever you went through as being the perfect little girl or whatever you had to do to keep mommy happy and, you know, basically that initial wound that I talked about where, you know, your care providers, you make a deal unspoken as you take care of me, provide me food and shelter, and then I'll mold myself to be the child that I think you want me to be. Right. That's right. And that's very formative in terms of the way that we create our identity that then as an adult now is still bubbling up these thoughts, which is based ultimately in a feeling of not being loved and accepted for you.
Sure. Yeah. And it's a lot of undoing, I guess. You have to undo
hence the
those things.
Really to go all the way back. What do you do in a situation where you're starting to realize, you want to realize it for yourself, and how do you get, if you're up against someone who is fairly unchangeable, how do you deal with that person so that they, you know, you're tired of being in combat with this person. Yeah. You know, you kind of I want to like lay out, I just want to like get through whatever we have to get through. Yeah. And not have to be combatants.
Yeah, I mean, it's a conceptual question, right? So if you wanted to get more personal, I could help more. Yeah. But to answer the question, it depends on the level of commitment to the relationship. Yeah. That really is the big overarching, you know, deciding factor. If it's someone that you don't particularly know, if it's someone on social media and they're being competitive, like, you know, for me, I don't engage, I block, you know, it's simple. Right. If it's a spouse, if it's a parent, if it's a child, well, now there's a certain degree of loyalty or, you know, a sense of commitment to that person. So then it comes down to, okay, well, how can I shift my perspective in a way that might alter their language and their behavior, right? Like you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change, and that includes other people. Right. So typically we're walking around, as we experienced with the woman yesterday, with a view of people that's based on history. Mm-hmm. So we're actually dragging with us something that usually is helping us to define our own ego. Right. So that we can be right about the view of that person. We're no longer in a relationship with that person, we're in a relationship with our view of them because it helps to justify something about ourselves. Now, if people just get what I just said, it's mind-blowing, right? Because you're not actually in a relationship with them. Right. You're holding on to something that could be 5, 10, even 20 years old, where you want to make them wrong, which is really what I say, poor man's version of self-worth is so I can be right. Mm-hmm. And when you really see that, it's kind of childlike. Childish, really. Yeah. And that's when people hopefully mature and go, you know, I don't want to do that. I'm committed to something greater. I'm committed to, you know, love and compassion. Right. But that also takes a big human being.
It does, like to take the high road.
It does, to take the high road. Yeah. I'll give you a little.
I can get a sense, but
you can get. I know. So my father passed away quite recently, and he was married to a woman that I have 2 brothers and 2 sisters, so there's 5 of us. Yeah. We don't get along with her very well, and now we're faced.
So it's not your biological mother.
Not my biological mother. In fact, 2 removed. I like you lost my mother when I was young, and have a bad relationship with feeling like loss. Like I feel, you know, I got divorced. Like all those things that you were saying. Yeah. I totally was understanding whatever you were feeling, but so now we're. Left with having to deal with her now in the aftermath, you know, with, you know, technical things, not even emotional things, you know, a house, cars, belongings, logistics, things of like that. But it is a very difficult, very tenuous, the buffer, my dad, is not there anymore. So now it's just us and her. Right. And I'm tired of feeling the way I'm feeling towards her. I just want to like be like, hey, I feel sad, you feel sad. Yeah. Let's just feel sad and move on. Kind of thing. That's where I'm coming from. But
no, I get
it's very like this.
Contentious. Yes. Yeah. I understand, and I'm sorry to hear that. So even in your languaging, you said you have to deal with, right?
Yeah.
So that languaging itself creates an energy of resistance. I don't know who this woman is. If I spoke to her best friend, she might have a completely, and probably would, opinion of her. True. So you're carrying a view which gets reinforced by your siblings. So you all get to be right, make her wrong. If I'm her, my spouse has died. I've got these 5, stepchildren who are making me wrong. I'm going to probably be quite aggressive.
Yeah.
Right. So that to me breeds a lot more compassion that this woman, whether you make it right or wrong, and it's about estate and money and stuff, that to me also then speaks to a little bit of ego within all of you, that there's this sort of sense of entitlement that, well, that's our heritage or inheritance or whatever it is. And, I can only speak from my own experience, which I just recently, in visiting my family in Belgium, was reminded of, which is when my dad died. I was 17. He went to work one day, so it was a disaster, not a natural disaster. He was on a boat that capsized. Yeah, and so he had, not married, but there was a common law wife. So someone moved in, which became kind of like my stepmom 4 or 5 years after my mum died. And so everything went to her. And my family in Belgium were really up in arms about this. They're like, that's, in their own language, bullshit, right? That you're his son, you're his next of kin, and yet this woman who was not your mother, has only been in his life for the last 5 years or so, is inheriting everything. Not that we were uber wealthy or anything like that, but there's a house that she still lives in. I'm sure the company that had to deal with, the insurance of people dying on their boat, there was big payouts, and I don't know what that was. I'm 17, I'm not I wasn't aware of that. And so the family in Belgium, who were sort of more my protectors, because my uncle, obviously he wanted to look out for me. And then there's this sort of father figure who had 3 kids my age I grew up with and whatever. So, I basically acknowledged them. I said, thank you for wanting to be a stand for me. And I found peace with it even back then, but certainly in this conversation where I was like, look, one of my quotes, I say, there's no greater debt collector than karma.
Mm-hmm. I feel that. Oh my God.
Yeah.
We say that all the time. We say that all the time.
So it's like I kind of put more trust in the powers that be, the universe, and whether you believe in a God or not, than I do in my own perspective, right? Like, as smart as I might be with IQ, EQ, PQ, SQ, and all the Qs, and I think I have a pretty good discernment and a very fair perspective. If that felt right to her, and everyone's going to behave within the limits of their awareness, and they're always going to behave or take action that is completely in alignment with their perspective, then to me that made sense to her. It doesn't mean that it's right in the eyes of others. And so I fortunately do okay, would that be nice? And would there be a certain degree of sentimentality that, like, she still lives in the house, maybe I can figure it out where I could own that house. She has 2 kids, and apparently we're supposed to split it 3 ways, and I don't know. Yeah. But I tend to lean into a distinction I teach, which is I care, I don't worry. Care is heart-centered, worry is ego-centered. And so whilst a lot of people in the most beautifully intended way think that that was unjust, I trust both in myself and my capacity to generate a livelihood and to know that everything will come out in the wash in due course. And if that's what she needed, then that's what she needed, and I can honor that. So likewise, I would invite you to consider that your stepmom is hurting, and maybe she comes from a mindset of scarcity. She's an older generation. I don't know what her sort of philosophy is about money and ownership. But anything that is grabby in an energy, I always have compassion for, because ultimately that person is living in a space of scarcity.
Yeah, which I feel like that you've kind of hit the nail on the head. I feel like that is very true of her. I feel like that's very true of her.
But if you can just reside in the fact that you don't need anything, that your inherent quality is freedom, love, possibility, and value, then when you live from that place, it's just we all become so misidentified with our physical form, our human nature, which by design is limited. So of course, from that place, we all want things, everybody wants stuff, right? Yeah. I mean, whatever it is, they want to be loved, they want to have money, they want to be famous, or whatever it is, but that wanting is in conflict with our true nature. Yeah. And so when we really understand that, there's a lot more peace, and ironically, from that place, things tend to show up without us even having to effort towards them.
That's true.
Yeah.
Well, something that you said yesterday about, if you ask somebody, what do they want, genie in a bottle, what do you want, $1 million? but that's not really what you want.
That is,
No, you want the experience. You think, again, that if I had extrapolated on that, I go further and I say, have you ever had $1 million? And Ed's going to say no. And I'm like, so then how do you know that's what you want? If I told you get $1 million and then all of a sudden you're going to have death threats from old family members who you no longer speak to because they found out you got money, and you're going to have people breaking into your home. Do you want that? So it's like, ooh, so it's the idea of something, and really what we're all looking for is an experience. And that experience is available to us right now. We're just under the impression that it's only on the other side of when we attain something, which is why it perpetuates the idea that our future is where our life's at, but it's not, it's here.
Yeah, that's, I mean, again, like, I want to go back for 1 second about karma when you said that. I always think, because I'm a strong believer in it.
Goes around, comes around. That's what we always say.
But I feel like it, for me, and now I'm understanding better as you're saying this, if you're coming from a place of care and compassion, and I love care versus worry because I'm the biggest worrier ever.
Yes, there was, It's not my first rodeo. I slipped that in for you.
I have a lot of anxieties. I have a lot of things. But I always feel like this idea of karma is negative. It comes from a negative place.
And that's how
me. And it's,
It doesn't have to be, though, right?
I know, but
it
like
could be
the karma that I'm
too.
waiting for to happen.
I know is bad.
I'm waiting for something bad to happen to a person. That's terrible. It's a terrible, I hate that I think that way, and I hate that those are, but that's my idea of karma is like, okay, he's going to get what he deserves.
So let me ask you a question. Do you have kids?
No.
Okay. But if, do you have a niece or?
I do.
Okay, great. So imagine her, right? So what I hear is like, if you look at the way you even spoke about your own concerns of anxiety, and you said you hate that, right? So now if you could break it down to its primordial qualities, what I hear is there's a part of you that's just scared. Yeah. That's what it comes down to, right?
What am I scared of?
It's okay, just stay with me, so it doesn't matter.
I'm
So you're just scared, right? So now your niece, I don't know how old she is, but how old is she?
18.
18, great. So, but you can remember her growing up when she was small. Okay, so let's look at your niece when she was 4 or 5. And she comes to her favorite aunt and she's scared. Would you say to her, I hate that about you?
Of course not.
No, do you see? So again, going back to what I was saying earlier, there's a part of you that is mechanistic. It's just happening. You're not saying, oh, I can't wait to be anxious. But what you're doing is you're denying the part of you that feels anxious, which only exacerbates the anxiety.
So I just have to feel.
Not have to, right? Again, so like I was saying, like she doesn't have to.
Gotcha.
It creates resistance. You get to.
I get to.
You get to pick her up. You can see your niece as a way of like, creating it as a third-party experience, but really it's a part of you that there's a part of you that's just scared. And if we were to dig deeper, we could go back to where was your house a little mercurial? Would dad raise his voice? Were you a very sensitive child? Were there things that made you feel scared, literally unsafe in your environment from time to time? So really that's the foundation upon which now this anxiety is, your adult experience. But really it's from the view of a child that never got seen, held, or heard. And she's asking for you to do the job now in the absence of the parent that didn't. And yet what you're doing through no fault of your own, there's compassion, is you're hating that experience. So it's actually creating the exaggeration of it. Isn't that fascinating?
Yeah, that is.
Yeah, so what if you were totally okay with your anxiety?
Right, if I was okay with it.
See, now what happens is you can probably even feel it in your physiology, it starts to soften and then...
It totally does.
Yeah.
It totally does.
Yeah.
Wow.
I just kind of felt my shoulders just kind of
go down. That's so wow.
That's interesting. I mean, and I've done a fair amount of work with a shaman, and I've done some spiritual healing and things like that. And there's nothing. I mean, I don't. My childhood was there was nothing that I can remember that was particularly negative about it. I was a very sensitive kid. I'm a sensitive adult.
Very sensitive. She's a very empathic adult.
Yes.
I have a lot of empathy. So I don't really know. Like I can't pinpoint something in my childhood that would have caused the way I react to things now. I mean, yes and no. I mean, I shouldn't say that. Everybody has something, and of course there are things, but there wasn't an abusive household. It was a very loving home, and but something that came up recently. So I'm divorced as well, and I went through a really terrible divorce.
Okay.
And some might say that I'm not over it.
Okay.
Some would. I don't know. Just random.
Just someone
Walking by.
Yeah, just total strangers on the street. Yeah.
Strangers might say.
Yeah.
And that's when I think about karma, and I think about so I'm all over the place here. Sorry. When I look back at my childhood and I try to think of like, okay, what was it that made me anxious? And there were things. I was a very self-conscious kid, and I didn't like to walk into a room of strangers, and I didn't want, and that carried through high school, college. I never wanted to be seen. I didn't want I don't know. And I get married, I get divorced, and then I went through this same feeling of like, oh, well, I don't want anyone to see. Like, I was so ashamed that happened to me, you know? And I'm like, oh, I almost was like, well, that validates everything that I've always felt about myself is now validated because he left.
Yes.
And I don't know. I don't know if there's a question in there, or if I'm just...
But I appreciate your courage in sharing and being vulnerable, because I can see a lot energetically in what you just shared, right? So I can feel the shame, not wanting to be seen is a behavioral adaptation to a deeper feeling of something inadequate about you, right?
Yeah.
Something wrong with you, you're not loved inherently for who you are. I don't know if that meant you had a more accomplished older sibling, or someone got more of the attention, or a friend of yours growing up was prettier, smarter, better athlete. But the sensitivity, and I don't know if any of those resonate, but...
Yeah, I'm the youngest of three, and there's a big gap between us. So I was sort of almost like an only child.
Got it. And what I also hear in just you sharing that is maybe a part of you as a very sensitive being is you didn't want to be in the way. It's almost like you showed up at the wrong time.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
So something in that, we can play with the language, right? But then if you live in the world of you don't want to be in the way, what would be a coping strategy?
Not being in the way. I don't know.
Yeah,
hide. You'd hide.
To hide and not be seen.
You'd hide.
I used to hide as a kid. I used to hide in things.
But that's not funny at all. Yeah. It's physics.
That's what he's saying.
I know, but I used to hide in like my toy box. I used to put on these plays, and everyone else would be the star of the play, and I would be the wind underneath the bench. Yes. More of my weird shit is coming out.
Yeah. But it's not weird. It's actually physics, because it makes total sense that behavior, like I said, your stepmom is making choices based entirely on her view. Everybody is completely dictated by their view of life. So if your view, and I just came up with that with the 3-second soundbite you gave me, that somehow your experience of yourself is I don't want to be seen, I don't want to be seen, I don't want to be in the way, whatever it is, right? So what that would mean is if that is your experience of yourself and how you relate to your family unit, then it would make total sense. It's not funny that you would naturally be drawn to hide. Which is also why you said you didn't want to go into a room of strangers. You didn't want to be seen after the whole divorce. So it makes actual sense, right? Now you can start to see and tap into the experience of that little girl. So you've got shame around it. What I hear is quite the opposite, right? It's actually that girl wants to be included. That girl wants to be held. She does want to be seen. But her way of surviving is because if she thinks she's an inconvenience or an afterthought, and whatever stories you heard about the age gap and blah, 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 that started to compile this identity, that you're the odd one out, then it makes sense that you're going to remove yourself from society.
Wow.
I never thought about that.
No, isn't that powerful?
I never thought about
that. That is crazy and good. But also, you can cut to the present day, and our friendship, our starting this podcast, our whatever, is that I walk, and maybe it's a function of what I do in my own personality. It's like, I'm like, well, why shouldn't we talk to you? Why shouldn't we? Why shouldn't they? Why? Hi, how are you? I'm very upfront. And I'm like, but once I get you in, you're fine.
I am, and I love it, and I love what we do now, and I love being with people. I love, I mean, I definitely love like more intimate, one-on-one type things, but I also am so quickly taken back. Like we literally just had an experience before we came down here.
That was a very negative experience.
It was very negative, and it automatically brings me right back to that, like, oh, well, not good enough. We're not good enough.
Well, not good enough is an extension, and it might be a bedfellow, but I just want to finish this so you really get something from it. So let's just say that who you are for yourself is that you're an inconvenience, or you don't want to be in the way, right? So then it makes sense that you would hide, you'd be the wind under the bed, that you don't want to be in a room of strangers. whatever it is, right? It's hysterical. But anyway,
funny.
but it makes sense. It's commensurate with your view of yourself.
Yes,
So now I'm going to take you again through the experience with your niece, right?
Okay.
So somebody who I'm assuming you love and that you care about.
Yeah.
So if you knew that her at a young age felt that she was an inconvenience and that you could, right.
It's like heartbreaking.
Yeah, that's heartbreaking.
And that's what you're going through.
Oh my God, that breaks my heart for you.
It's heartbreaking.
Yeah,
I
that's
never.
heartbreaking.
Wow, that is quite the epiphany.
And that, my dear, is a part of you. It's not you, but it's a part of you that you were hating and trying to get away with, away from with shamans or whatever you're doing.
Yeah.
And actually that part of you just wants to be included.
And and you think that that's where, or part of where this anxiety,
I know.
that's where it comes from.
Yeah.
Because that girl feel into her. She's so self-conscious and aware. She doesn't want to be in the way. That is a very anxious way to relate to life.
Yeah.
But if she's included, where's her anxiety?
Interesting. Wow. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So your opportunity is not to go from a position of hate and judgment of that part of you, but really to include from an aspect of love, just like you would for your niece. That little girl feels like she's not wanted. That's what broke your heart. But part of you is that same energy. And you've been bringing the opposite energy. And through no fault of your own.
Yeah.
But now the opportunity, you're going through the how of your question earlier, is through the awareness of it.
Yeah.
Do you want to live in that pain? Do you want to deny that part of you like that? No. Yeah. It's pretty moving, isn't it?
It is. And it's something to, I guess I'll ask you this then, how, this feeling that I have right now and this sort of epiphany, in this moment, how do I access that on a regular basis?
I don't know. For now, it's enough that you could see it,
Okay.
right? This is something you've never seen before in your life.
Yeah.
That's pretty powerful.
Yeah.
You're never going to forget this day.
Yeah.
Now, because of the karma and the momentum of your habits and your conditioning, you might want to revert back to anxiety. You're in a room of strangers, you go back to that default feeling. And then the opportunity is to come in as the adult with the awareness, embrace that little part of you, the little girl who's feeling overwhelmed or not included, or she's an inconvenience, and go, no. That's just a pattern. It's not me. And I'm going to make space for that, and I'm going to love it.
Oh my gosh. Are you going to cry? I'm going to cry.
I'm going to cry. I'm going to cry because I love you. We're friends first, and that I am going to cry. I witness your anxiety on a daily basis when we get into an elevator, when we're flying, when we're, we're doing this. It's not fun. It's not fun for who's traveling with you. But I accept those things about you. I try to cater to them too. I try to,
It's just so sweet.
She tries to make everything.
I try to I'll run back up to the room because you don't want to go in the elevator.
Yeah.
I'll do this. I make a lot of allowances for those things because of our friendship. And to see you kind of make this, also, it blows my mind about this is that the way you're a health professional, you look great, you take pride in the way you look, you are very fit. All the things on the outside of you makes people think you want to be seen, and yet the inside of you don't want to be seen, which I think is kind of interesting to me.
Yeah, I want you to consider, and I really appreciate you being so open and vulnerable. I know I kind of hit you with the spiritual 2x4 unexpectedly.
Yeah.
It's but
it's
it's
part of our
beautiful.
podcast. We treat them as personal doctors.
Right. Yeah, I've been on one.
We're just about the free advice.
Yes, exactly. I've been on one
this.
pretty big podcast with a gentleman 4 times, and he's only had me as the 4th. I think he's done one other person free, but the comments are always like, "You just have Peter Crone on to get free therapy."
Right.
Oh, we're having you back.
Yeah, I know.
No, but
anyway.
it's really beautiful because I can get how so kind and caring you both are, right? And the difference you make for your audience, and hopefully this conversation touches a lot of people, but yet there's that blind spot, which is really impactful in a way that you were oblivious to, right?
Yeah.
And so there's no fault, there's no shame.
Yeah.
Ironically, we're making space for your shame,
Yeah.
which is really this little girl who we can feel into, what is it like to go around the planet where you think you have to hide, and especially as a child?
Yeah.
It's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And you have, unbeknownst to yourself, been like pushing that part of you away when all it's actually asking for is, ironically, to be seen, to be held, to be heard. And now this, for the first time, you can actually really completely reconcile anxiety, mitigate the shame, and become much more integrated with every part of your humanity, which makes you, as a woman particularly, so much more powerful and an even better friend, because you allow other people to do that too around you, and that's really special.
So you're welcome. I'm going to be a much better friend.
Thank God. Been carrying a lot of the weight.
I know, bearing the brunt.
Yeah, and that to me is talk about real karma is the reason you incarnated, without getting too philosophical, is that you became the last, the runt of the litter, because you were here to be able to recognize the part of you that feels like you're an inconvenience or not included, so that you could transcend that. And you get to do that right now.
Wow.
That's amazing.
That's amazing. Yeah.
I don't know where we go from here.
I know.
I think that's a pretty good wrap up.
That's a good wrap.
I mean,
thank you so
thank
much.
you.
What a pleasure you are. Truly.
Thank you,
I mean,
thank
really
you.
like a
Amazing.
very positive
What brought you
energy.
here to the
Yeah, that was
biohacking?
actually my
It's like,
last, that was going to be my wrap up question.
Sorry,
What about biohacking brings you to this conference?
Well, the powers that be asked me to come and speak, so that's one thing.
Okay.
But I'm very passionate about vitality, you know. Without any kind of slight towards this group, I don't use the term biohacking. I don't like that. I'm more into optimization. So health optimization, relationship optimization, optimizing the human experience. I want to maximize my potential. So I enjoy the field. I have many of the toys that I take care of my own vehicle with. But as you saw in the talk that I gave yesterday, to me the ultimate quote-unquote optimization is to free your mind and to get out of this world of limitation, fear, suffering, and disease. And hopefully you got a pretty powerful glimpse of that for yourself.
I definitely did.
So here, as long as I can help people in that regard, then I'm being of service and making a difference. And,
You definitely
you know,
are.
that's why I say my main product is freedom. And
Tell us really quick about your, because I was on your website last night, just real quick, if
Oh,
you want to
cool.
plug anything or put it in our show notes.
Sure, yeah. If people want to find me, my Instagram is just at Peter Crone, so my name, and then my website, petercrone.com. And I have created a new membership platform, which I'm really proud of, because, you know, if somebody wants to work with me one-on-one, I'm not the cheapest guy, through supply and demand, and I'm, you know, very blessed to have people around the world who find me who are big hitters, but I wanted to make something available to everybody, and so it's just $29 a month, and there's 70 plus hours of content, about $8,000 worth of value of courses, from my premier Free Your Mind program to a workshop on anxiety, a workshop on depression, a workshop on health, a workshop on relationships. I do a monthly Q&A. There's a wisdom library with all sorts of clips, and there's a community, so you get to meet people and share your stories, and it's the most loving, supportive, safe community I know of. So.
Great. Awesome.
Well, thank you very much.
Thanks for being
here.
with us.
Thank you for taking the time.
It's a pleasure to be with you, and
really a pleasure.
Hopefully that made a difference for you too.
Yeah, definitely so. Thank you.
Thank you.
We watched it again after doing it last May, and I think we were both struck by
how good looking he is.
Yes, we were both very enamored with him, and it was lovely to sit in person with someone and have a conversation.
Yeah.
It was so cool to like really chat with him. And we uncovered some of the roots. I mean, I do laugh to myself when you say that you were in school plays and you let everyone else have the parts and you were the wind.
I was the wind.
The wind.
Beneath your wings.
Exactly. Which you are the wind beneath my wings.
No, it wasn't even a school play. It was plays I would produce myself.
So you would produce it and still, and still wouldn't want to be the star.
Right. I was either the narrator or the wind. Not whatever it was to not be seen. That's the part that I
like
gave
that you
myself.
thought the wind was invisible.
Well, it was because I used to hide under a bench.
And what would you do as the wind? Would you go, ooh?
No, I would. It was really good. It was like, whoosh, like that. And what I used to do is my parents had this like long bench in the basement, and I would take a piece of like plywood, and I'd lean it up against the bottom of the bench, so I'd hide underneath there. So you'd hear like almost like not an echo, but you know, like it would kind of close me in, which is so bizarre.
So bizarre, it would close you in?
Yes. Oh, that's the other thing.
Wait,
we didn't even
what?
get into this, but like, yes, I used to
You are so claustrophobic.
I know. But I used to love, when I was a kid, I would hide. In fact, there was one time where, do you remember like in the malls, there used to be like those rounders, like the racks that had like the clothes in a rounder. And I would go and hide inside the rounder, to the point where one time they had to call the mall security because they couldn't find me. So I was hiding in the in the rounder.
You can't be in closed spaces.
I know.
At all.
I know.
When did that switch?
That's a good question. I don't really know when that switched. Definitely like as I was an adult.
Right.
But yeah, but anyway, so yeah, but he also gave you some good advice.
He gave some good advice. And like, and since that conversation with him, I tried to view dealings with that person going forward.
How'd that go for you?
It's a difficult situation.
Yeah.
And there's no way around it. But I think if you are able to take a step back and, look, I always pride myself on, I said this in the interview and I've said this before, that I do always try to remember that the person you're talking to may be having a shitty day and that's why they're mean to you. So it's like to try to put yourself,
a
shitty life or something's gone wrong or something that's making them react in ways that they do. But it's very hard when your emotions are it's so emotional.
Something I wanted to ask him that we didn't get to, and I'm just kind of thinking of it as you're saying this.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think people are, or do you think people are like inherently shitty? Or like, does it have to be that like something happened to them in their life that makes them this bitter or whatever, makes them...
I feel like something happens to them.
Yeah.
Because look, we all start out the same.
Right, with a blank slate.
But I forgot who told me this, whether it was my own therapist or something I read, which I found to be very true. Or maybe it was like one of the marriage counselors we went to. Like someone said that when
Speaking
you have...
of inherently shitty.
Yeah, exactly. When you have some sort of trauma, and everyone's there's different levels of trauma.
Sure.
Like my trauma clearly was my mom dying when I was a teenager.
But it doesn't have to be as traumatizing as that.
It doesn't have to be that. It could be the way your parents spoke to you or the way you felt, even if your parents weren't doing something like. But if you don't deal inherently with that trauma, every time you're faced with a similar situation,
you react the
same way as you did. I become that 16-year-old girl.
Right.
And so I try not to be that. It's hard for me because I said to him, and we didn't really dig deep into it, but I have a trouble with loss, with people leaving. Like I become very, like, I need to know. Attached.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I'm better about that with you, truthfully.
Yes, you are better.
Yeah.
But
I've worked hard on it.
Yeah.
I actually have worked hard on that with you in particular.
I
like
definitely
me,
could.
you had nothing to do with it. It was like my own thing with you.
Yeah. I think just with friends in general, like you don't want the person to.
Yeah, I don't want to lose you. Like I don't.
You're stuck with me.
I am. I hope I am.
There's no getting around it.
No, I hope I am. But I have a trouble with people leaving because I had this big loss that you never said goodbye. I never dealt with it. My dad never. It was the time. It was the 1970s. Like nobody.
You didn't talk about
that. He should have marched all three of us into a therapist's office to deal with our mother's death. And instead, I think he may have gone to therapy. And I'm not blaming him. He did what he did. He did the best he could. He was suffering. Like
of course. I
mean,
he was young.
Life just died.
Yeah.
Everyone was young. And so... But I do, so that's why my divorce was hard. That's why, when I don't let go of people easily, like I'm stubborn that way.
Right.
And so all of that is my trauma that I've tried to work on, and I think I'm a little better about it. And you get older and you're better about it.
Sure.
But
yeah.
I think that is true. Like I think whatever's has happened to you, unless you go back, and that's the same with, I don't think I'm speaking out of turn, like my ex-husband, he had kind of like a rough childhood. And so he dealt with things in a way relating back to, whatever he did. But, I don't know.
I just don't, I don't like when people sort of use that as an excuse to be jerks. Like, go and figure out what it is, deal with it.
Right.
then be a better person.
Right.
You know, I do just want to say one thing because in watching this back, and I said this to you, that I feel that I don't want to say that he misinterpreted me because he definitely didn't.
Yes.
But I think that it was, I think the origin of my stuff was a little different than the way he was describing it. Like and I've said this to you too, like I had a great childhood.
You did.
I had very supportive parents, very loving parents. I was, the youngest of three.
Girl.
Yeah, I was the youngest of three. There was a big age gap.
Yeah.
And maybe all of those things played into it in some way, you know, what he said. But I was very spoiled because of that. And I was the only girl, and I was daddy's little girl for sure.
Yes.
So I think that the quote unquote trauma of me, you know, having this sort of like self-consciousness and wanting to hide and all of those things, I kind of think it came from somewhere else.
But look at that. But it is.
I know exactly what it was.
Oh, what?
I told you this. So, and I didn't think about it when we were interviewing him, and I kind of wish I would have said it because it might have taken a different turn. But so when I was in kindergarten, I was 5 years old, and I don't know, maybe this is silly, but I was 5 years old, and I was getting on the school bus, and you know, we lived in New Jersey where like the trees in the fall would drop these like little berries, the little like red berries, and I guess they were on the school bus.
Yes.
And I walked on the school bus, and I stepped on one, and it sounded like a fart. And so everyone on the bus, you're 5 years old.
Right.
Everyone on the bus, I might have even been 4 years old because I remember, I think I went to kindergarten kind of young.
Mature were you?
I was, you know, I was so advanced. But anyway, everyone burst out laughing on the bus. I was mortified. I didn't want to go back to school ever again. I went home, told my mom. And what did she do? She made the principal then ride the bus with me, which probably was even worse. But either way, like that was a trauma to me that I, you know, I'm 53 years old. I remember that happening.
At the airing of this podcast, she's be 54.
Oh, shush, quiet. Don't be airing my age. But you know what I'm saying? Like 40 something years later, that's such a vivid memory. I remember what I was wearing.
Yeah. Well, you remember what you were wearing to any event
or true.
Any day. You're like a wardrobe savant.
I am a wardrobe savant. I'm a fashion savant.
You're a wardrobe. Well, it's true because I know in kindergarten, like I don't like threes. I don't like friends that it being a threesome because when I was in kindergarten, I came in the middle of the year and I was befriended by these two girls, Carly and Joy. And
Harley, that's an edgy name for the 70s.
Yeah, Carly,
60s, actually.
It was the 60s, yeah. Well, no. Oh, yeah, it was. It was 60s. But anyway, but they always like would pick on me. Like I was always the odd man out. So I'm very sensitive to being the odd man out. I even feel that to this day sometimes with my sisters.
Oh,
because there's three of us.
Yeah.
That I'm like, what are you guys talking about? Like, I feel like left out. Even now.
Oh, that's
it's like
funny.
So crazy how that like stays with you.
Yeah, I mean, threesomes are, you know, I mean, those kinds of threesomes, I guess.
Well, I don't know.
There's other kinds that might not be so bad. I'm kidding.
Anyway.
But yeah, this is a very long outro. But
I think it's a good one. Because I feel like it's, a lot of times we do these outros right after we've talked to the person, so our feelings are fresh. But now we've had a chance to watch it 6 months later and then give you like our real feelings of what you know, we saw when we were like watching it again. It wasn't so fresh. So I think that's an interesting way to be. I think that's why it's kind of like dredged up all these other questions that we have for him.
Absolutely. Like I'd almost love to have him back.
I know now afterwards. Well, you never know.
You never know. But he really was like getting back to him and his technique and his skills and something I had forgotten that I said to him that I said, and I didn't mean this offensively, but when I said like, it must be hard to be in a relationship with you.
Yes, because you think someone is like analyzing you.
It's like being in a relationship with a psychic.
Totally.
You know?
Yeah.
But anyway, the mind architect, Peter Crone, go
Check
on his
him out.
website. He does private coaching. He does events.
Masterclass.
Yeah, he does speaking engagements, all of that stuff. So definitely check him out.
And we hope you like this one as much as we obviously did. And we love doing it in person. So I hope that you're watching us right now on YouTube.
Because if you're not, you should be.
You should go back and watch it. And not for us. And I also want to point out that I've lost quite a bit of weight since that interview was filmed.
You have. You weren't happy watching that back. I
was not happy watching that back at all. But anyway, enjoy this. We loved having him. And have a great day. I'm Lori Schulweis.
And I'm Jen Giamo.
And this was Everybody Talks.
Talk to you next time.
Take care.
For more information about our podcast, to learn more about us, and to catch up on all of our episodes, go to our website at everybodytalkspodcast.com.
Follow us on Instagram at Shuli, at Jen Giamo, and at Everybody Talks. And if you want to watch today's episode, go to our YouTube channel at Everybody Talks Podcast.
Join the Everybody Talks community by checking out our Patreon page, where you can become an exclusive member of our wellness group and be a part of the conversation.
And don't forget, if you like what you've heard, give us a 5-star rating, write a review, and tell a friend. We're for everybody and everybody. The Everybody Talks podcast is co-created, executive produced, and hosted by us, Lori Schulweis and Jen Giamo. Produced and edited by Station 16.
Our theme song music is written and performed by Jackie Ryle and Aaron Navisi, with additional support from our pups, Oliver, Milo, and Murray.
Talk to you next time.